406.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie, and I'm joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
Once again, I'm excited to be here. I think this is going to be super fun. I can't wait to talk to you again tonight, and I'm glad to be a part of this podcast for sure.
So the last time we got together, which was March the 27th. Not to pull back the curtain too much, but today is April the 21st as we record this. So we're still sticking to at least less than once a month, which is good. You know, not as often as we would like, but we're making progress. We're doing good. So our last podcast, we talked about our favorite WrestleMania matches of all time. And that, of course, was the lead in to this year's WrestleMania, where unfortunately you were not able to join me, but we chatted a lot. We texted a lot. I still built a pyramid. I think you still watched the show, even though we were on vacation, correct?
Yeah, we did. We were down in Florida with my family, and it was a really sort of unique experience because I had to kind of set the stage that I was going to watch WrestleMania, because that was really important to me. And of course, this year, much like the 2 or so years previous, it was a 2-night event. So I had to kind of set the stage, like Saturday night, I'm going to be watching WrestleMania, and the same with Sunday. And Saturday night, I think, was the first night that we were there actually in spring break. So everyone was kind of tired and a little wiped out from the travel. So they were all kind of hanging around. And my 2 girls have taken a bit of a shine to wrestling, especially my youngest. And so they actually watched WrestleMania with me, at least a couple matches. And my youngest has become a very big Bianca Belair fan, and she wants to go as Bianca for Halloween. And they were really excited to see her take the title off of Becky. And I mean, it was just, the show itself was fantastic. And we can talk a little bit about that from a spectator standpoint. But just the fact that my wife and my 2 girls were sitting on the couch right beside me watching this, it just made it so much more fun, and I loved it. It was great.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you got to experience that with your girls. You know, I mean, as we've chronicled many times on this podcast, I mean, I've been watching professional wrestling for the better part of 40 years now.
Yeah,
not quite that long, but the better part of 40 years, and I could still remember sitting down and watching, you know, old school superstars or whatever it was called with my grandfather on a Saturday morning. And my grandpa thought that shit was real. I mean, he was all in, and I just have such really warm memories. And now my boys watch it with me, and it was certainly a bummer that you weren't in Cleveland, but I was glad that we were able to kind of share some texts, and you know, we were certainly chatting back and forth. And oh, by the way, you, sir, are now the proud recipient, or the owner of the John Cena WrestleMania Trophy. Congratulations, sir.
Oh my gosh, it has been a long time coming, and I'm very excited. It's been, you know, all I've thought about since we, you know, intoxicatingly purchased that John Cena trophy at Target a handful of years ago on a WrestleMania weekend. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I was a little bitter that I've lost it. Yeah, I've lost the opportunity the last couple of years because I came really close, but I was very excited that this year I finally won the confidence pool, and John Cena is coming to Indiana at some point somehow. But just to see my name embroidered on his chest, for lack of a better term, is pretty awesome. So I was really excited about that. I was happy that I think night 1 of 2, I picked all of them but one correctly, or all of them?
No, I think you had a perfect night the first night.
I think I had a perfect night. And the only reason I did, I think, is because one of those matches got bumped. But I ended up finishing pretty strong, and I was really excited. But much like years past, this confidence bowl came down to the wire, right? Like it was down to
came down to the final match.
Yeah,
it came down to the final match,
which was really exciting and really fun. Even though I couldn't be there, which I was brokenhearted about, like it still made the experience really, really fun.
Yeah, I was pumped. Yeah, my brother was here. My kids were, my oldest two boys watched it with me. And again, Pip and I were we're texting back and forth, and I was super excited. I remember, in fact, right after the show was over, I went and I recorded a video and I sent it to him, and I think I put it on TikTok even. And it was just great. It was me kind of tattooing the chest of John Cena with Pip's 2022 victory. So I will either get him in the mail to you, or if we can figure out a time where you can come here and you can pick him up in person, we can do that as well.
That's what I would very much prefer. So I've been scouring the calendar to try to find a weekend that I might be able to come out and visit sometime this summer, in which case I can claim my trophy in person and obviously get an opportunity to spend some time with you out there. So
yeah, so we're not talking WrestleMania tonight, but no. Just give me 30 seconds. Did you enjoy? And we won't go through every match or anything like that, but just did you enjoy WrestleMania weekend this year?
I got to be honest, I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, it was obviously disappointing that we couldn't share this in person, but I can say from a spectator, it was so much fun. I mean, if you don't get too wrapped up into the weeds of being a huge wrestling fan and you just sort of let the moments happen and enjoy them, whether it's Stone Cold and the Pat McAfee match and even the celebrity matches, from my perspective, were fun. And those are typically the ones I hate on the most, because I don't believe that celebrities should be in a wrestling ring. But this year, for some reason, it just felt lighter and it felt more acceptable to really just sit back and enjoy the spectacle that is WrestleMania. And I feel like they pulled out all the stops everywhere they possibly could have. And for that, I was grateful. And I thought it was a really fun show. But what say you?
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I have been kind of pretty outwardly, or I've been vocally opposed to the 2-night WrestleMania for a variety of reasons. I think part of it is because I'm getting older and I just can't go the same way that I used to. And 2 full nights of, it's essentially back-to-back pay-per-view nights can be a little bit long. That being said, this year didn't feel like that. No. I mean, it was Saturday night, I think, was if I'm kind of grading them, as a pay-per-view in and of themselves, I think Saturday night was probably the stronger of the two overall.
Yeah, for sure.
But Sunday night was amazing too. I mean, I was a little bit concerned when we got the announcement that Stone Cold Steve Austin was going to quote unquote main event against Kevin Owens on night one, and it was going to be essentially a talk show, the Kevin Owens show. Which, by the way,
we were. I mean, I'm not going to say that I called it because I didn't call it, but I remember I listened to our last podcast and we're like, this doesn't feel right. Like you can't main event with a talk show. Like something has to happen.
And they sure as hell didn't. They went 15 or 20 minutes and they had a legit match. And It was not just a stunner beer fest. It was a legit match where, I mean, Steve Austin wasn't the Austin of the 90s, but you know what? He was taking suplexes outside the ring on the concrete, and it was
mind-blowing.
I'm getting goosebumps talking about it right now. It was awesome.
It was fantastic. And then they did finish with the stunner beer drinking thing.
Yes,
and that was great. It was beautiful. It was like the ultimate fan service match for people who love Stone Cold, and God bless him, go into the sunset, don't ever come back. That's totally fine. I don't know what it took to get him there because they've been trying to do it for many years, but I'm glad they did it. I'm glad that Kevin Owens was a part of it because I'm a big fan of what he's doing these days. And I thought that was great. It was so much fun.
I agree. And then they just kind of continued the fun factor the next night. And again, there's a ton of highlights, but I'm going to come back again to Austin because you've got Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory. McAfee comes out. He wrestles a legit match. I mean,
decent.
McAfee
super decent. Yeah.
Clearly is an athlete, right? He was a professional football player. He comes out and he's got a match with Austin Theory, and then he has a match with Vince McMahon of all people. And then you know what and I guess if I would have really thought about it, I kind of would have figured it out. But they bring Austin out again,
of course,
for the Sunday night crowd.
Yeah,
he gets that interaction with Mr. McMahon. Of course, he takes the worst stunner in fucking history.
Oh, it was so bad.
I mean, it was so bad. But here's the thing: McAfee then drinks beers with him after the match, and he takes a stunner, which after the facts, I find out he didn't know that was coming. That was all
that's
ad-lib. Well, that's what he said on the podcast. Yeah.
I don't buy that for a second. You don't get in the ring with Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania and not get a stunner.
And not expect a stunner. Okay,
it's fair. Not. I call complete bullshit on that. But I will say kudos to Pat McAfee. I love Pat McAfee. He's a little amazing. Crazy and over the top as an announcer, but I love the guy so much. And I think it's so cool that he had this, I mean, talk about a WrestleMania moment, right? Like he grew up a huge fan of wrestling. He gets into WrestleMania. He actually gets to wrestle a match. He wins a match at WrestleMania. He goes against Vince McMahon at WrestleMania. And then he ends that experience with getting stunned by Stone Cold. I mean, if there could be a bigger dream come true, I can't imagine what it would be. And then the scene where he's like half cocked and knocked out and he's drinking beer, he's just pouring it in his mouth. Like it was the dumbest thing in the world, but it was also like just the fist pumpingly awesomest thing I have ever seen at WrestleMania. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. It was a fun night all around. Again, we're not going to go through and kind of review every match or what have you. There was some down stuff too, but I think overall it was a super fun weekend, and yes. I couldn't have been happier in general. All right, so.
But we are not here to talk about that. We are not
here to talk wrestling. Unfortunately, WrestleMania season is behind us, and that means we've got other stuff on the 411 to talk about. And, you know, this is something that we've been teasing. I think it's probably fair to say I know we mentioned it on a previous podcast. I don't remember exactly which number, but we're doing another deep dive tonight. And I absolutely love these. I enjoy the last couple times we've done these, they've gone several hours. So I don't know how long we're going to go tonight.
Might have to do some editing tonight.
But we're going to sit down tonight and we're going to start the Star Wars Prequel Trilogy. I'm going to start with 1999's The Phantom Menace.
Wow. That's going to be good. I think it's going to be really good. I'm excited about this because we've got our sea legs underneath us as far as the deep dive thing goes. And I mean, let's be honest, we've been wanting to talk about this prequel trilogy for a long time now, right?
We have. So our first kind of Star Wars deep dive, if you want to go back in the archives, we started on episode 47 of this podcast. We released it kind of early May 2021. We started with The Force Awakens, and then we came back with The Last Jedi in episode 48 and The Rise of Skywalker in episode 49. And I think I have had quite a bit of feedback from people that really aren't even necessarily regular listeners, but have listened to those 3 episodes of the podcast and kind of really enjoyed the format that we went through. So I think it's fair to say we're going to kind of go back to that same format, really kind of understand what those movies meant to us then, what they mean to us now. I don't know about you, but I went back in preparation for this and I rewatched The Phantom Menace.
Did you? Good.
And I did. And yeah, I have some different thoughts now that I did in 1999. I'm excited about this conversation. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
I think this will be really interesting because you and I talked about doing this, but we have not talked about what our thoughts are since we have both respectively rewatched these movies. So it'll be interesting to see kind of, you know, I think we both know where we were on how we felt about this movie, but it'll be interesting by the end of this podcast to feel out where we are as far as like, do we feel like these movies were well made? Do we feel like it was worth our time? You know, and, you know, this is the first of 3. I mean, obviously this is The Phantom Menace. This is episode 1 in honor of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that's getting ready to come out on May 27th, I believe it is.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Which, by the way, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Stranger Things season 4 coming out the same day. Like,
are they really doing that?
Clearly, they're not doing. So Netflix is doing Stranger Things.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And Disney is doing Obi-Wan, and I am not working that day. I'm going to have to take that day off because that's just how it's going to have to be. But in honor of this Obi-Wan series that's coming out, which I think we're both legitimately excited about. We both, I think, agree without any spoilers that Ewan McGregor was one of the greatest things that happened as part of the original trilogy. I'm really excited to see that story continue and what that means. Like what happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi while he was babysitting Luke from a distance.
All right, so here we go. So the Phantom Menace, it was released on May 19th, 1999. It was roughly 16 years or so since the end of Return of the Jedi in 1983. And there was a really long period of time where we didn't expect any more Star Wars.
Oh,
right?
No.
Like we thought Star Wars was done. The Vader gets burned and the Emperor's dead and boom, we're done. There was no Star Wars. And so I can remember very vividly, and even for years kind of prior to the Phantom Menace even being officially announced, there was always whispers of, oh, well, Lucas has this whole other story, and George Lucas got this whole other, it was really a 9-part story, and we're like, whatever, fuck that, that's bullshit. And sure enough, it came to fruition.
Yeah.
And so this one was once again written and directed by George Lucas. It was produced by Rick McCallum, who Star Wars fans know that name as well. Stars Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Jake Lord, Ahmed Best, Ian McDiarmid, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, Frank Oz. It's got the music by John Williams. And most of those names today, as I read them, are household names, but they really weren't in 1999. You know what I mean? Like with the exception of, Frank Oz, Natalie Portman, Liam Neeson was known. Ahmed Best certainly wasn't known. Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker for sure, right? But they weren't the names that they are today, I guess is my point. But if you go back to Star Wars, right, those were at that time unknown actors, right? Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford. You just
Carrie
didn't
Fisher,
know them,
all of
right?
them.
Now, obviously, that was Star Wars is not really a comparable because it was the first of the thing, but I just remember how excited I was when I saw that original teaser trailer for the Phantom Menace.
Oh my God.
And if I remember, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it now, because if you remember, there was I believe there were maybe Naboo fighters walking out of the mist.
Yes,
and it had something about the legend was born, or the legend, or whatever it was.
Yes.
And good God, that teaser trailer, I'm looking at, man, I'm getting legit goosebumps.
Yeah
that first teaser trailer was amazing because it was the first like legit Star Wars that we had in 16 years. And I can't even begin to tell you how hyped I was for this movie months and months and months before it came out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to remember back to when I first learned that there was going to be another Star Wars series. And I honestly can't remember that. And we have to consider that this was a time when the internet was still in its infancy, right? So this is late 90s. So we didn't have, maybe we had YouTube, but if we did, we didn't know about it. Like it wasn't the mega conglomerate that it is right now. And so I don't remember how we found out, but I do very specifically have a memory of being in the basement at 406 North Lane and being on Buford's computer and watching that trailer over and over and over, and how incredibly jazzed I was when that music hits, like when John Williams music hits in that trailer. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like I never thought in my life this would happen again. And I was very, very excited about it. And I feel like I probably saved that trailer to a floppy disk because that's what we had back then. But yeah, it was mind blowing. It was the idea of taking modern technology and using it to make a new Star Wars movie was incredibly exciting.
Yeah, it was. And we'll certainly talk about kind of how successful or unsuccessful that new technology was as we went through. So I'm just kind of looking at Wikipedia here. So Lucas began writing the Phantom Menace in 1993, right? So which is before we graduated from high school, and production began in 1994, which depending on the specific month was when we were, freshmen in college. Filming started in June 26, 1997. we're kind of halfway through college or what have you. But again, I mean, I wish I could go back and figure out kind of specifically when that trailer dropped, because you're right. I mean, the internet was in its infancy, and I'm sure we saw it on YouTube, or we saw it in front of another movie. In fact, I remember there was a bunch of people that, like, whatever movie it was in front of, I don't remember which one, there was a bunch of people that went to the movie and then just fucking left after the trailers.
Absolutely.
Like, they paid a ticket to go see whatever it was and then just left. Before we kind of get into plot and what happens and those kind of things. So again, this was filmed on location once again in England. It was filmed once again in the Tunisian desert for the Tatooine scenes, which I thought was really cool that they kind of went back to, I don't know about you, but I don't know that I would necessarily know the difference between desert A and desert B, but I do think it's really kind of cool that they went back to the same desert, to represent the same planets. It is the highest grossing film of 1999. At the time, it was the number 2 grossing film of all time, behind only Titanic. It had, quote unquote, only a budget of $115 million, and it made $1.027 billion. Which in
1999 wasn't too shabby.
I mean, again, by today's standards, I don't want to say $1 billion is not nothing, but there's a lot of movies out there that make $1 billion. But you're right. Back then, there was only 2. It was this one and Titanic.
Yep.
In fact, I looked today, even still today, it's 43rd all time. And that includes all those Marvel movies, all the subsequent Disney Star Wars films, all that stuff. 43 from a 1999 film is still pretty fucking good, if you ask me.
Oh, absolutely.
This was a Titanic success at the box office, for sure. No pun intended.
And maybe the most impressive statistic out of all of that, it is the movie that I have seen the most in the theaters in my entire life.
Is that right?
And I'm not sure that I'm proud of that, but that will show you how hungry I was for new Star Wars content. I've seen this movie 5 times in the theaters, and I'm pretty sure all 5 of those times happened in the first week and a half that it came out, because this was one of those movies that I believe came out on a Wednesday night, back when they were releasing movies like midweek.
Like a
kind of bolster
midnight Wednesday kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was to bolster the overall weekend box office statistics. And I saw it 3 times an opening weekend, from the Wednesday that it came out to the Sunday that it ended, and then twice more that following week. And I haven't seen it in the theater since, but it's not a particularly proud achievement of mine, but still it's pretty crazy.
So let's get into it. You're gonna kind of walk us through you're gonna go the same kind of plot summary type methodology that you did for the first 3?
Absolutely. I've got my notes here, and I'm gonna walk through. I'm gonna start us off in a place where I didn't start us off before. I'm actually gonna read the opening crawl, because I feel like it's important to talk about how this thing starts, because it's going to start very differently than I think a lot of us expected. So the opening crawl starts as such. So turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. And immediately,
you can't even do it.
It's hard to even get through, because, I didn't care when I saw this movie, but I'm reading this through and I'm like, okay, this sounds like a really fucking boring movie, but all right, let's just keep going. Hoping to resolve the matter with a blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, to settle the conflict. Now, at the end of that crawl, I've learned nothing about Anakin Skywalker. I have no idea where that's going or what's going on there. It's fine that they don't maybe reveal everything at that point this early. But I mean, we came into this prequel trilogy with the expectation that we would get the story of how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Like, that was the only mission, and I'm going to repeat that because this is going to come up again by the time we get to the third movie.
It will, big time.
The only thing they had to do with these entire 3 movies, with the 6 hours of film, was to tell the story of Anakin Skywalker and his demise into the character of Darth Vader. And so far, we're getting a lot of very politically flavored content, and then that's not going to stop anytime soon. So we'll jump right into it. So we start with the two Jedis boarding an unknown ship as ambassadors to the Republic to try to help settle this trade dispute, as the crawl tells us. And right away, I think we're getting a taste of for what these alternate political based storylines are going to be, which is really I guess it's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I mean, obviously the movie's been going for about a minute, so there's not really anything to judge, but I mean, we're going to get into this considerably, and it's going to really muddy up the story, in my opinion. But we then see the reveal of Qui-Gon Jinn, who's played by Liam Neeson, and a younger, yet to be mindful Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Ewan McGregor, getting ready to negotiate a settlement with the Trade Federation viceroy, who, by the way, has a very distracting, almost insensitively insulting accent, right? Like I
racist, it's not even funny.
I said
you could not. Yeah,
I called it out. The trade block hard, or whatever he says in the crawl.
You could not do this character today. Disney would never do this character today.
Oh,
no chance.
No
chance.
Yeah, I remember very specifically in the first 5 minutes of this movie, hearing that character, hearing the viceroy speak and thinking, what is wrong with this? Like, this sounds like a really poorly dubbed martial arts movie from the early 80s. And it was, I don't know, like, I'm not sure what the motivation behind that was. I mean, there are a lot of nationalities represented throughout the Star Wars universe, and some of them favorably, some of them not so much. But I mean, to me, this felt weird right out of the gate. But nevertheless, we get our first look at Darth Sidious, who we are to believe at this point is the eventual emperor, and he gives the orders to assassinate the Jedi while they are on that ship. And then there's this badass scene with lightsabers melting down this door, and before the Jedi make a great escape. But I mean, right away, like immediately, I will say that it is incredibly noticeable that Star Wars with modern effects looks great. Like in 1999, this blew me away. Like, I loved everything that I was seeing visually on screen.
Yeah, I mean, this was when you see the Jedi here, specifically Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, you are seeing, again, remember, the only Jedis that we have up until this point in the saga, right? You've got a lightsaber duel between old Ben and old Vader.
Yep.
Which is, geriatric Ben and we didn't know it, but geriatric Vader. Then we've got a fight between father and son in Empire Strikes Back, which was really good, yes, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. In fact, that was probably the best fight of that trilogy, the main trilogy. And then you had the rematch on the Death Star where Luke bested Vader. Even in the first 10 minutes of this movie, just the Jedi, they blow away everything we've seen before.
Yes.
With I mean, again, I would still say that the lightsaber battle on Bespin was better, but just purely from a Jedi kind of capabilities perspective, we've blown it away already.
Well, the lightsaber fight on Bespin was better, but not because it was a better fight. It was because there were more stakes. Yeah. Right. It's because this was Luke, and he was doing the best he could, and it was Vader, and it was the story that helped propel that to be as good as it was. But there was no story at this point at the very beginning of this first movie, but we had people who had clearly been trained to do proper sword fighting, and that's what made this awesome. I mean, immediately the way that Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson were both handling the lightsabers made me feel like, oh wow, we're stepping it up a notch.
Yeah, I mean, just the way, just something as simple as, if you remember the scene where the Jedi are trying to get into the, I don't know, we'll call it the control room. So Qui-Gon takes his saber and he plunges it into the wall, right? The blast door.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan, as he turns around, he kind of flips the saber around. It's just like little things like that where he's
absolutely.
He's so confident. He's so good. He is a master at his craft.
He's trained. And he's a trained fighter.
and just in that moment showed us more than we've ever seen previous in the saga, which was just amazing.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It was great. And from the beginning, I'm like, okay, all right, we stepped it up. Let's go. Let's see where this goes. So the two Jedi stumble on a bunch of battle droids and decide to retreat to warn the Chancellor of the impending attack. And things get a little bit confusing, I think, at this point. We then meet Queen Amidala, sometimes played by Natalie Portman, on planet Naboo, as she's trying to talk to a hologram version of Senator Palpatine when communications are interrupted and invasion is suspected. This whole thing is pretty fast paced, to be honest, as I'm watching this, and it's not taking a lot of time to breathe. I don't think. Like they jump right into it. It's full blown action right away. The Trade Federation quickly swoops to Naboo to track down the Jedi when they bump into a group of Gungans, most notably the very polarizing Jar Jar Binks. And wow, speaking of accents that seem like they don't age well, Jar Jar is very distracting in the way that he talks, and quite frankly, very difficult to understand at some points. But I mean, maybe now is as good a time as any to bring up the fact that Jar Jar Binks might be the most hated character out of the entire Star Wars universe. And I feel genuinely bad for Ahmed Best, who was the voice of him, and it was just taking direction and doing everything that he was told to do. But like Jar Jar at that point, at that time, was almost cancerous to the story of Star Wars. And in my opinion, I mean, what say you at this?
I think you're right. I think probably the only character that has ever even really risen to the level of hate that Jar Jar got was probably Rose Tico. Come Last Jedi.
Yeah, we'll get there. Well, we already did get there, I guess.
we will get there. We weren't well, no, we are. Yeah, we got there already.
We did.
I guess what I will say is I didn't really understand the level of hate for Rose, and I didn't really quite understand the level of hate for Jar Jar. I'm not suggesting by any stretch that I enjoyed the Jar Jar character, but I don't know. To me, like if you look at Star Wars, right? And again, you have to look at the Star Wars through the lens of what we had already had at that point, right? We'd only had 3 movies. So we had Jawas, we had Ewoks, we had, C-3PO. We still had some kind of silly stuff.
Yeah.
Now where Jar Jar kind of stands apart and stands above those is he had a lot more dialogue, and he was a quote unquote character, a main character, not a main character, but he was a character, right?
He was pretty primary for that first movie.
He was. And he was difficult to understand. He was, I guess here's what I will say. The first couple viewings of this film, certainly that opening night, I didn't really mind him all that much. And I think it was partially because I was just kind of taking the movie in. I wasn't really able to understand everything that was going, and I think you've even mentioned this on a previous podcast. Like the first time you watch a movie, you just kind of have to take it in and let it kind of engulf you.
For sure.
You can't really critique. You can't really, those kind of things. As I saw it more and more, I think I grew to like Jar Jar less and less, but I still never had the level of vitriol that I think I've seen for that character. I'm not saying I like that character by any stretch. It just for me at least, it never rose to the level of just like hatred that some people have for that character.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough call because I am the same way. I'm the same as you in that when I first watched it, I was just taking it all in. I was so happy. Like there's nothing you could have done. Like Jar Jar could have pulled down his pants and taken a huge dump right on the ground, and I'd have been like, this is brilliant. It looks amazing. What a nice looking dump that was in CGI or whatever. But
the CGI dump. Yes.
But to your point, as time goes on, like it does wear on you, because I think it feels to me like they're just trying to shove him down the throats of the viewers and take this movie and make it really focused towards a younger audience. And I wasn't a younger audience when I watched this movie. I was an older audience, and the people that were going to see Star Wars movies, I think for the most part, they were our age, or maybe even older.
Certainly this movie. This movie
Yes.
was 100% geared toward, let's see, how old were we at that point? We would have been, we'll call it mid 20s to mid 40s. That's what this movie was absolutely geared towards.
Yeah.
Right. People that grew up with the original trilogy, and they were just kind of hoping that they would hook the younger audience. But that younger audience, they didn't give a fuck about this movie right out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe over time there was a younger audience that gravitated towards these movies and only knew these movies to be what Star Wars is. But yeah, it didn't jive with me. It just felt off. It felt too forced from a comedic perspective. And, Star Wars has always had a layer of comedy, but it felt very natural, and this felt forced. This felt like George Lucas was telling us we were supposed to laugh, and that just didn't resonate.
Yeah, I guess the best way I can describe it now, coming back to it now, is it feels juvenile.
Yeah,
it really feels beneath the rest of the stuff that's going on in the story. And again, I don't know that I necessarily would have come to that realization even 5 years ago. But again, coming back to it now, it really feels like that's the one character and the one kind of plot line that is geared towards my 7-year-old, as opposed to me or my teenage boys. Like, that's the one that my little guy would like.
And we're going to see George Lucas course correct pretty considerably for the rest of the trilogy as we go through these. But for now, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan escape to the impressive-looking underwater Gungan city with Jar Jar to speak with the leader, Boss Nass, who reluctantly gives our heroes transport after being convinced by the old Jedi mind trick. I mean, this stuff looks really good. It's goofy as fuck, but it looks really good, and I appreciate that much. So, leaving the Gungan city, they must traverse the planet core, which leads us to a fun chase scene with some large underwater creatures, which again, they look great. But as I'm watching this, it just seems, I don't know, it seems clumsy, and it doesn't feel like it pushes the story as much as it takes the opportunity to just show off the special effects. And then we have some nonsensical conversations with Jar Jar, and they make their way back to the surface of Naboo finally, where the droid armies are storming the capital city, actually called Theed, which I learned from doing some research. I'm not even sure that the capital city is name dropped like that in the movie, but the Jedi thwart the attack from more than a few inept droids and save the Queen from and her court, and they make their way to the main hangar to escape and plead their case to the Senate. And we get many more fun Jedi saber fights, which again, I'm gonna continue to comment on this because I feel like it makes it looks like they're actual swordsmen, and that's just such a cool upgrade from the first trilogy.
Yeah, I think this, we're not quite there yet, but the sword play in this movie, I think, is probably my overall favorite of the entire saga. Wow. I really think, now that's not to say that it has the best fight in it, but I think overall as a film, I think it's probably my favorite because again,
statement.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is, and I think it's partially because, like, kind of what we've already talked about, where it's really the first time that we've seen truly what a Jedi can do.
Sure. Right.
It's like, oh shit, these guys are really good. And then of course we'll get to the, kind of the final fight. But yeah, I think this one holds up really, really well for me.
So their ship escapes while taking some hits, which is where we are introduced for the first time to the iconic R2-D2, who saves the day. Finally, an astromech who is actually doing something worth a shit. And after discovering a hyperdrive leak, they decide to land on what other sand planet but Tatooine to repair their ship, much to the chagrin of Captain Panaka, I guess is his name. I had to look that up because I couldn't remember, who is the head security guard, I think. We then cut back to a conversation where the Viceroy has to tell Sidious that the Queen has escaped. And we see our first look at Sith baddie Darth Maul, who is now in charge of finding the Queen and her crew to sign the treaty. And wow, I mean, what a badass. Like already the first glimpse we see of Darth Maul in a hologram, and holy shit, how cool is that?
Yes, Darth Maul is an absolute badass. I still feel, and again, I'm going to just talk about this movie when in terms of Darth Maul's kind of character arc. I know that there's more that comes, right? Whether it's in comics or cartoons or previous subsequent movies or what have you. But yes, I loved Maul. I thought we got gypped with Maul in this film. But god damn, he was amazing.
Yeah.
He was so good. He was so good that he overshadowed the kind of political bullshit that was kind of running through this movie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but like it took me several times of watching this movie to understand kind of all the machinations in terms of what's going on here from a political perspective. I don't give a fuck about a trade federation or a trade blockade or like, I just don't care. Right. And there just doesn't seem to be any stakes to any of that stuff. And I know there's even a lot of deleted scenes out of this movie where they even expand on that shit, which thank God it was deleted. But again, Maul here, Sidious here, really even they overshadow all that stuff, and I'm glad they did, because that stuff it really kind of slows down this stuff, this movie, and I'm glad it is as subdued as it was.
Absolutely. Seeing Darth Sidious and Darth Maul remind us why we're here to begin with, right? We didn't come here to see a political commentary on trade federations breaking down or trade routes or any of that stuff. Like, that's not why we're here. Now, I understand, like, I want to make it clear, like, I get why George Lucas was doing this, because he doesn't give a shit about trade federations. He's trying to tell the story of why Palpatine came to power. But I think we spent too much time focusing on that and not enough time on the Jedi and the Sith and how everything sort of graduated into the spot that it should have been. I mean, we got there eventually. Whether we were satisfied with how it was told or not, that's another story. But when Darth Maul jumps on screen, I immediately think, screw all this Trade Federation stuff. I don't care about any of that. I want to see some badass saber fights. Right. I want to see Jedi and all of that. The Sith go toe to toe and battle for the fate of everybody.
So I have to take a detour here real quick, right? So you just mentioned the first time we saw Maul in this film. Maul is in the trailer, is in the original trailer, yes. Right? And the double-sided lightsaber is in that original trailer, which is the first time up until this point that we've ever seen that in the Star Wars universe. Do you remember how you felt the first time you saw that double-sided saber?
Oh, man. I remember seeing that in a trailer and thinking, wow, talk about escalating a situation like that. It was super cool and immediately left me pissed off that I had to wait 6 months or however long that was when that trailer came out to see the actual movie, because I wanted to know how that fight was going to work out, because that was amazing.
So I have I have to make a confession. I don't know if I've ever told you this. Like, if you recall, there's two shots in that original trailer that show the double-bladed saber. The first one is the one where he actually kind of shows it and extends it, right? Where you actually see it, right? Yeah. It's the kind of the head-on shot. There's another one though where they're showing the battle from afar, and legit, the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, they're training. It's a training exercise. I thought it was like 3 Jedis and this guy has a training module and he's going through and he's training. And I was like, no, that's yeah. Anyways. Okay. Sorry. I apologize for the detour.
Continue, sir. Okay. No problem at all. So Qui-Gon, Jar Jar, R2, and Padme travel together to the familiar-looking Tatooine with the intent of repairing their faulty hyperdrive when they stumble upon a shop. The first one, by the way, how convenient, that has exactly what they need. Also here is our boy hero villain-to-be, Anakin Skywalker, played by Indiana native Jake Lloyd. So right away, we're off to a weird start. I mean, I don't know how you're feeling about this, kid. The dialogue is super awkward, which, I mean, to be fair, the dialogue that George Lucas writes is always awkward. Makes more sense on paper than it does to deliver verbally. But like this whole scene is starting to creep me out a little bit. Not creep me out, but it's starting to make me worry about where this whole story is going, because I'm not comfortable with I don't even know how to explain it. I think that it's very poorly done. Like it just feels poorly delivered, and it really takes me out of the story.
Yeah. So coming into this story, coming into this movie, you're right. This trilogy had one job. Its job was to show the fall of Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader. I never expected to see a prepubescent Darth Vader. I never in a million years would have suggested that we would have gotten I don't know how old he's supposed to be, 10 years old, 12 years old. I never thought we would have seen Vader or Anakin at that age. I just assumed that we would have, the first time we ever would have seen him would have been, Attack of the Clones age, teenage, 18 year, that kind of, So when we got Jake Lloyd here, immediately I was kind of on my heels. I was just, what is this? It felt like, it's a terrible reference. It felt like the Christmas Story Ralphie, clearly not like comedically, but just kind of that kind of bumbling, silly kind of like ho hum, life is happening to me kind of way.
Sure.
And yeah, immediately when I saw this, and it wasn't even the dialogue necessarily, but it was just kind of the innocence of the character. And maybe that's what they were going for, right? Maybe they were trying to go for innocence falls to darkness. Okay. Sure. But if that's what they were going for, they didn't get there, in my opinion.
Qui-Gon can't convince the Tridarian, boss of the shop, to give him the part. So the team leaves to come up with a plan for the needed funds. And Anakin takes the group back to his house, where he talks them into sponsoring him in a pod race to get the necessary credits. We learn, quite strangely, in my opinion, that Anakin is actually the creator of C-3PO. And we see C-3PO for the first time, and we get to witness him meeting R2. That in itself is kind of cool. We also meet Anakin's mother, Shmi, who curiously allows her son to join a very dangerous pod race to help his new friends. We'll see her become a more important part of Anakin's journey in the next movie. But for now, Qui-Gon secures a spot in the pod race and wagers on Anakin's freedom to sweeten the pot with the Tridarian. In the next scene, we learn some very controversial exposition where Qui-Gon identifies him as a potential Jedi, and Shmi reveals that he had no father. And at this point, it's like, wait a minute, what's happening? He was immaculately conceived. Was this to give him a Jesus-like quality, or did they just sort of cop out on who is the dad? I mean, my mind was racing, I think, when I saw this at first. Where were you with this?
This is the record scratch moment. Right? Wait, what? That's what this was. It was the wait, what? And not in a holy shit Kaiser Sose kind of way, right? This was the like, wait, what the fuck are you talking about kind of way, and not the what the fuck, what are you talking about, explain it to me kind of way. It was the wait, I'm out kind of, you know what I mean? Like it was it was so out of left field. I mean, yeah, there's clearly some Jesus stuff going on, but like that wasn't even where I went in my mind. I was just kind of like, this was the first time I was really, really let down with this film. Right there. Midichlorians, no dad, like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you sort of open the door to the next point, because this is maybe the most fiercely contentious storyline that eventually rears its ugly head. The introduction of the Midichlorians, which is a very polarizing topic of Star Wars fans, which helped to highlight how powerful young Anakin actually is. So this sort of introduces the idea of science into the Jedi, which up to this point, were identified more as a religion, I think. So I'm curious to know, how did you feel about this then, and how has this aged for you, and why do we do this?
I wasn't a fan of it then. I'm not a fan of it now. I was a big fan of the quote unquote religion of the Jedi. Like I liked that concept.
100%.
I liked that. It was a way of life. It was a creed. It was an outline. It was the way you lived, like that kind of thing. It was a religion, right? Again, we could talk about whether we agree, disagree, religion, blah, 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 this, that, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
And once you introduce midichlorians, then you're introducing this element of chance, right? It's like, I'm not choosing to be a Jedi. I just happen to have a lot of this shit in my blood. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess I understand why they did it, but again, for me, I preferred when the Jedi Order was more of a choice, more of a religion, more of a way of life,
right,
versus a biological thing that actually made you physically more into a Jedi than more of a quote unquote spiritual thing. Again, my opinion. That's where.
I mean, I actually agree with that. I think the spiritual aspect of the Jedi was always very intriguing. At least it was to me. I have to think that maybe the whole midichlorian thing was introduced just to prove the point that they talked about at some point around this time, which is that Anakin was stronger than Yoda, right? So he had a midichlorian count that was bigger. They were trying to prove the point that he had more potential, and this is how they were telling the story, that we had to pay attention to Anakin. And I don't agree necessarily that was the route that they should have taken by any means, but I think that's the rationale behind why Lucas decided to do that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I guess the argument or the rebuttal to that I would make would be like, if you look at you look at the Dalai Lama, right? Like he's leveled up to me, right? Like as a regular guy, right? So I guess my point is there would have been other ways that you could have gotten the point across that Anakin was quote unquote better, right, versus just saying he had more of X in his blood, which is essentially what they did.
I think that was the way to push the story along, to be like, okay, this is why we have to take him, because we've done a scientific test and it tells us that he's better. But I agree. I mean, we're on the same page here. I think it took away from the magic and the mystique of what the Jedi are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, this is the reason we have to take him. We're not going to take him just because he's really good at pod racing. We have to take him because, well, his midichlorian count, scientifically, he's stronger than Yoda. So we have to look into this. I think that's why they did it. But here is, and I guess I've never really articulated it, but like kind of as we're talking about it, right? So when George Lucas sat down and wrote the original trilogy, we are now to believe 16, 20 years later, whatever, that he didn't actually just write 3 movies. He actually wrote this big 9-part story, this 9-part saga that he just chose to tell the original, the middle 3, right? Right.
Okay, fine.
Sure.
Okay. For argument's sake, let's just say that that's the case. If that's the case, again, up until this point in 1999, all we know of the Force really is what Yoda told us on Dagobah. That's really all we know. It's a mystical force. It flows between us. It's all living things, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't mention anything about a grading scale where one guy is better than the other.
Sure.
That's my problem, right? And this, I guess this is the kind of first time where it feels like, and again, I don't know if this is the case, but it feels like Lucas is kind of trying to square peg in a round hole kind of thing, right? He's trying to force this particular kid onto us. He's trying to force his version of like, why should we care about Anakin?
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
And again, I think there are, and I'm not suggesting that I have better ways to do it, but I think there are better ways to do it versus through this. He's got more of this stuff in his blood than I do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm on the same page with you. I think this was just a contrivance, for lack of a better term, to get Anakin wedged into this story a little bit more fiercely.
It's the Sith Wayfinder of Phantom Menace, right? I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is.
So we then get to the pod race, which is a 10+ minute visual spectacle that arguably could end up being the trademark action sequence of the entire prequel trilogy. In my opinion, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it because it's an action sequence, but it's visual, it's brilliant, it's really, really well done, which includes a blink if you miss it cameo by Warwick Davis, who would end up in 5 of the Skywalker saga movies, along with Solo and Rogue One. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, we could shit on this movie all day long, but you're right. This is a great sequence. I mean, it just is. It is it's the equivalent of the speeder bike scene from Endor,
but it's updated with really great visuals, so it stands out a lot.
Yeah,
it's
but
long,
it looks
and it's
better.
Unnecessarily long, but it's really cool. Of course, Anakin wins, and our heroes get their new hyperdrive. On the way back to his house, Anakin learns that he also earned his freedom. He's very conflicted leaving his mother, but decides to travel with the Jedi to be trained. He promises to return, which he will make good on in the next film. Before leaving, however, we get our first look at Darth Maul in action as he tracked down the crew to kidnap the Queen. A quick battle ensues and the Jedi escape to fight another day. And then we get this iconic line, which I still get the chills over a little bit.
Anakin Skywalker, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Hi.
I think that's great. I still think that's amazing.
It is. This fight scene on the desert where you see Darth Maul, you kind of see what he can do. And then, yes, the introduction of Obi-Wan to Anakin really is good. And it gives me goosebumps every time I see it. It is an introduction that is really, really well done.
We get our first look at Coruscant, which we've heard about in the movies and in the books. It looks brilliant, along with a much younger Senator Palpatine, played again and only by Ian McDiarmid, and Chancellor Valorum, played by Terrence Stamp. Palpatine starts sowing the seeds of discontent almost immediately with Padme in order to gain more power for himself by attempting to boot the Chancellor. And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, as this is all happening, visit the Jedi Council to inform them of the Sith attacker, where we meet Mace Windu for the first time, and of course get reacquainted with Master Yoda, who, if you were there in the theaters to see him in 1999, you will notice a very nasty looking puppet, which was later digitally added and looks much better now. When they redid that movie, they completely redid his character, and the puppet looked very uncomfortably off in that first movie.
Yes, the original puppet was bad, but I remember feeling like so excited to see other Jedi that were of the caliber of Yoda.
Yeah,
because again, up until this time in the movie, up until this point in the saga, all we knew of the Jedi were Yoda, kind of Luke, kind of Vader, and then Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, right? We really hadn't seen any other Jedi that were on kind of the Jedi Order that were at that caliber. And I remember I was pumped seeing these guys sitting around being like, oh my God, there's a bunch of other badasses sitting around, kind of like where Qui-Gon is reporting to these guys. And so, yeah, even though the puppet was bad, I remember I was really, really excited to see this kind of the Jedi Council.
They also begrudgingly agreed to meet Anakin after Qui-Gon tells them he's so strong with the midichlorians that he may have been conceived by them. Which I'm still wrestling with. We cut back to the Senate where Palpatine successfully manages to indirectly unseat the Chancellor, aligning himself as the successor. Back to the Jedi Council. We do a lot of bouncing back and forth in this movie. Is harshly judged because he's a kid who misses his mom. I don't know. I mean, I think the Jedi are a little weird in this movie. First of all, why is their home base on a planet made up of one large city? And second of all, what expectations would they have of somebody who's 8, maybe 9 years old, who misses his mom and can't fathom him being a part of the council?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that we will come to learn about the Jedi. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of taking kids away from their home life and making right, just in general, just like I'm against that, and I don't care who knows it, right? Sure. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the problem with these scenes here is they're compounding. In my mind, they're compounding errors, right? You've got the error of the midichlorian, and then you've got the error of let's take a kid away from his mother, and then you've got an error like there's just they just kind of keep building. It's like just kind of bullshit upon bullshit. And even though 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago I was really excited to see the Jedi, now I'm seeing, I don't even know who it is. It's Ki-Adi-Mundi or whoever it is, being like, your thoughts are on your mother. Well, of course his thoughts are on his mother. You just yanked him away. Like what the fuck else is he going to be thinking about, right? So I guess what it shows me for the first time really is that the Jedi can fail.
Yeah, they're fallible.
Yeah, they are. They're not perfect, and I guess this is kind of the first time that I've really kind of seen that, where it's just like, oh, yeah, these, not that they're bad by any stretch, but maybe they're not always right.
Yeah. And not only that, but they're misguided in some ways. Like the Jedi are not going to come out of this particular trilogy looking all that awesome. I mean, really,
no, not at all.
They're a series of failures, one on top of the other. Obi-Wan is the only one that comes out with any dignity, to be honest. Maybe Qui-Gon. Spoiler alert, he dies at the end of this. But I mean, Yoda, he's not a great character in this trilogy. And Mace Windu also not super thoughtful going through and making these decisions. And I don't know, like we'll get there. We'll talk about a lot of this stuff through here, but it didn't sit real well. It's not what I had in mind of what the Jedi was supposed to be if we're talking about a group of people versus just Luke Skywalker. So the Jedi initially declined to train Anakin Skywalker, but Qui-Gon attempts to take him on as his Padawan no matter what. They are then sent back to Naboo to uncover the identity of the Sith. The Queen leaves Palpatine to enjoy her new position of power while she goes back to Naboo to help her people. While back home, Jar Jar helps our heroes find the Gungans hiding out on land. And we find out that Queen Amidala was actually a decoy the whole time, played by Keira Knightley. Not sure why this was inspirational, but the Gungans teamed up with them anyways, with these land dwellers, and they prepare for battle. Like that scene was super, super clumsy. Like for no reason whatsoever. They're now all of a sudden friends. Boss Nass, who is clearly shit-canned, makes Jar Jar a war general of all things. And the Queen's plan is to kidnap the Viceroy to overtake his army. We then find ourselves in the battle. That's certainly visually impressive, even if it looks like it takes place on what can best be described as a Windows 95 wallpaper background come to life. Qui-Gon said, "We cannot fight a war for you, but I'm not sure why not, because these droids are clearly the most inept things that have ever existed, even more so than any stormtrooper, and they didn't seem to have any issues slicing them all apart."
Yeah. So here's the point in the movie where, again, we're coming off the last half an hour of this movie. We've introduced midichlorians, introduced a Jedi Council who is fallible. We like, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense logically. This whole kind of middle, once we got past the podcast, right? Or not podcast, pod race. Once we got past the pod race, which again, it's a race. Like, that's very simple. It's clean cut, beginning to end, who wins. Okay, got it. But now we start introducing all sorts of just kind of spooky shit that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't understand why we had to have a decoy for the queen. Like, okay, Keira Knightley's hot, but like, what like she added nothing to this movie. Like that whole scene added nothing. I think you're right. Boss Nass is hammered through the whole thing. Yeah. Why the fuck would you ever make Jar Jar anything other than a foot soldier? I have no idea. Right? It just doesn't make. There's a whole lot of stuff that just doesn't make any sense here. And kind of as we continue forward, it's kind of starting to fall apart for me. Yeah. This half hour here is really rough.
Yeah, I agree, because our heroes are going back into the capital to attempt to try to kidnap the viceroy and overcome that whole situation.
And again, it comes back to the fact that the whole premise of this movie is about taxes and trade routes and
politics.
So they're right, politics and politics that we don't understand and really don't care about, right? And so the Jedi that we presumably do care about are going back into a situation that they've already escaped from, but now they're going back to address something that we didn't give a fuck about the first time. Like that yeah, you kind of see where I'm going. Like, yeah, it just doesn't. There's no, like, yes, there's stakes, but there's the stakes we don't care about.
Right. Absolutely. So our heroes get back into the capital and find their way into the hangar where Anakin escapes with other pilots to head into space in an attempt to knock out the droid control ship. And I will say that this is a really nice looking space battle. Like, this is, in my opinion, what I feel like would have been nice to start the movie with in some way, shape, or form. It looks gorgeous. Like, the space battle stuff is amazing. And it's a clever way to give Anakin something to do, while being an obvious nod to what Luke did in A New Hope, right? So Skywalkers will be Skywalkers. And it's funny to see Anakin's autopilot taking him right to the enemy droid ship. I didn't understand that. He worked so hard to get it off of autopilot, but for some reason it's guiding him right to where he wants to be. So, that's convenient.
There's reasons.
But the Gungans and droids square off, and we get the face-off we've been waiting for when Darth Maul, who's played by Ray Park, shows up with his double-bladed saber to battle Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And we're also greeted with I don't even think it's arguable, the greatest piece of film score that was written after the original trilogy. And I include the sequel trilogy in this. There is no better piece of score that John Williams wrote in the Star Wars universe after the original trilogy than the Duel of the Fates. It is so fucking epic.
The Duel of the Fates is fucking amazing. It's so good. And they bring it back a couple times later in the trilogy, but you're right. I mean, this is John Williams at his best. It is, I can't agree with you. I can't come up with any other superlatives to agree more. It's outstanding. And this is where, again, I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, this is the beginning of what I consider the greatest saber fight in the Star Wars trilogy. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And you can't say enough about John Williams and his contribution to the Star Wars universe. And I will say that to his deathbed and mine. He's amazing and he's brilliant. And these movies would be nothing, absolutely nothing, without his contribution. But to your point, these are where the lightsaber battles really get exciting. And this is clearly the most interesting of the three ongoing battles that we're watching kind of bounce back and forth as they laser sword their way through the interior of the capital city. Obi-Wan gets split up temporarily while Qui-Gon and Maul find themselves in this weird room where there are random force shields protecting them. Seems like, again, a bit of a contrivance just to split everybody up. So be it. The Gungan battle with the droids ensue as Jar Jar continues to make me wish the whole planet would just fucking blow up already. But Qui-Gon and Darth Maul continue their one-on-one battle inside the capital city, where Maul gets the best of him and knocks him right in the face to stun him. And then Qui-Gon takes a red saber right into the gut. And I mean, I don't know. It was a powerful scene. It was crazy. Did we ever figure out officially why Qui-Gon never disappeared as a Jedi? Because all the Jedis, when they die, seem to disappear. And I feel like maybe this was addressed somewhere, but I can't remember.
I'm sure it's addressed somewhere in a book or a comic or some canon somewhere. I mean, it has to be. It's if it's not, it's too big of an oversight not to be. I can't recall reading about it. So I'm sure one of our listeners will tell us about it. No, to answer your question, I'm sure it has been. I don't remember what it is. This scene to me, even though I had some issues with it, right? So earlier in the movie, we saw an example of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon using super force speed, where they could kind of they just went away, and I'm not quite sure why Obi-Wan couldn't do this now to get back with his master and help him out, but whatever. Bad. It was. I mean, I think it was pretty clear once they got split up that, Qui-Gon was Fucksville. I do remember that. I do remember that this was spoiled for me before the movie came out, because I saw because I saw the track listing of the score
soundtrack. Oh no. Yep.
And it's called Qui-Gon's Death or whatever it's called. And I was like, well, fuck. Like, I guess Qui-Gon's I didn't know when it was going to happen.
Oh my God.
So I knew Qui-Gon was not going to make it out of this movie. This one killed me, man, because I was a huge fan of Qui-Gon Jinn.
Sure. He was the new Obi-Wan, right?
He was, man. And not only that, but he was the version of the Jedi that I really liked.
Yes.
He was all about the spirituality. He was all about the religion, but at the same time, he was kind of pushing back against the political bullshit that was coming in. Yep. Like, he was the Jedi that was all about, and to see him and to see us lose him just one movie in, I was really, really bummed.
I was bummed too, but I don't think we're done with him. I'm going to make a bold prediction that
I hope you're right, dude. I hope
we're going to see him, or at least hear him in the new Obi-Wan series. I will be shocked if we don't, and disappointed if we don't. I think we're not done with Qui-Gon yet.
Well, we almost have to, right? We heard him. Yes. We heard him in Rise of Skywalker.
Well, they teased it in Revenge of the Sith too.
Yeah. We almost have to see or hear, at the very least hear. We almost have to, right? Because just in terms of the timeline, you almost have to, right?
Yes. So a pissed off Obi-Wan is finally set free and has an epic battle with Darth Maul when he gets pushed into the shaft. Hanging on for dear life, Obi-Wan manages to force jump clumsily out of the pit and grab Qui-Gon's lightsaber all in one fell swoop and slice Darth Maul in half, which, oh man, I feel like there were so many better ways that we could have done this. I don't know why it couldn't have just been a traditional, sword slash that killed him. I could honestly, even when I first saw this movie and in the first couple of viewings, I could barely tell what even happened there, because I thought the way that they shot that, yes, it's painfully obvious that he got sliced in half, but it didn't look like that when he was flying down the shaft or whatever it was. I don't know. I just felt like there were much better ways to do this. It just didn't. I agree. It seemed sloppy. It seemed.
I agree. And in fact, I don't know, and maybe I'm just misremembering this, but so now if you watch it, when you get the slice, there's kind of like a blood spurt, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
I don't think that was there originally.
Maybe not. I
don't
think
think
you
it was.
might be right, because I don't remember seeing that.
Okay. And here's the thing, right? And I'm going to sound like a total nerd right now, but like, if you understand the way the lightsaber works, theoretically, we shouldn't see a blood spurt. Like, there should be no blood, because it's this plasma blade that is cutting through. Like, it should, in theory, cauterize what, like, there should be no blood. Just
like Luke in his hand and Empire Strikes Back.
And Qui-Gon getting cut. Yeah, just like now, but I guess now that I think back, though, like, there was blood on what was the thing in the Mos Eisley cantina. There was blood. Yeah. But again, that was 1977.
It was inconsistent.
Yeah. So anyways, I was happy here, clearly, that Obi-Wan defeated Maul. Wasn't a huge fan of the little force jump thing. I would have preferred, I think in retrospect, I would have preferred that he just would have defeated Maul without going over and then coming back. You could still get Maul cut in half. You could still get him falling down to the shaft. You could just, the whole thing. You just didn't. Yeah.
It was like the Star Wars equivalent of the RKO, if we're going to tie this back to WrestleMania.
It was. Yeah, it was an RKO out of nowhere. You're right. It was. I guess what I will say is because it was good overcoming evil, I didn't care as much. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care as much. But looking back on it 20 some years later, or not quite, whatever, I have a more critical eye than I did then, I guess, is the best way I can describe it. Yeah.
Hindsight is 20/20, as we all know. Padme and team managed to capture the Viceroy, and Anakin crash lands on the droid control ship while he accidentally blows it up on his way out. I don't know. This whole thing was super clumsy. All the droids crash, insert another Windows 95 joke, and our heroes have won the day. So we get through, the climax of the battle. We get to the celebration towards the end, and we hear some really, one of my favorite quotes of the whole movie.
And you, young Skywalker, we will watch your career with great interest.
By, of course, Chancellor Palpatine at that point. Yoda ends up making Obi-Wan a Jedi Knight, and he insists on training Anakin again. Yoda, despite not wanting to do any of that, grants his wishes. I'm so confused about the power structure of the Jedi at this point, because everybody just seems to be giant pussies. I don't know. Like, it doesn't, none of it makes any sense. Like, Yoda many times is like, no, we're not going to do this. Just like, all right, fine. I guess we're going to do this. So it just seems like Yoda is very wishy-washy about how he wants things handled here. We do get a quick funeral scene for Qui-Gon, which was nice, even if we never got one for Han or Luke or Leia.
Still haven't gotten one.
No, don't even get me started. And after a festive Gungan celebration in the streets, we see our heroes exchange some winks, and John Williams' music is cued, and we roll to credits. And I think at this point, we are officially done with the Phantom Menace. So, I mean, wow, lots to soak in here, lots to take in. Again, I think we were both probably really excited and really energized the first couple times we saw this movie, because it was new Star Wars material. It was upgraded special effects and lightsaber fighting and choreography and all of that. But, as I'm watching this many, many years later, I will say that the green screen effects are a little bit painfully obvious. Again, it was the technology at the time, so they did the best that they could, and it was good back then. The back and forth between Palpatine as a senator and Darth Sidious gives me a bit of a migraine, because I can't quite figure out what they're trying to accomplish. At this point, by the end of this movie, not knowing anything else, I didn't even know if they were the same people. Like, I thought maybe they were going to pull a switcheroo of some kind.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I can remember very vividly conversations and web forums and blogs, and we're openly discussing, is Sidious Palpatine? Is it a clone? Is it the same person? Is it this?
Yeah.
So do you remember kind of where you stood? Did you think Palpatine was Sidious coming out of this, or I guess going in you wouldn't know, but coming out of this movie, did you think they were one and the same?
I thought they were. That was where I was leaning, only because it was very clearly Ian McDiarmid was the actor playing both parts.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
there was no doubt about that. So I thought that they were, but I wasn't sure, because at that point, Darth Sidious, who would eventually become Emperor Palpatine, he wasn't hideously old or disfigured or scarred or anything like that, which didn't really occur to me that we'd get to that part and something would happen. I just knew that somebody who looked and sounded like Emperor Palpatine and was wearing these black robes and hoods, that, you know, he was trying to control things on the backside. So I was really having trouble understanding how both of these things were happening. And it turns out, as we're supposed to understand, you know, Palpatine was controlling both sides of everything in a manner that would eventually get him in a position of power, which I don't think is obvious from this first movie. And I think it takes a while past this to even try to figure out that that's what he was doing.
I was going to say, I don't know. So to come back to my question, I think coming out of this movie, I think I probably thought that they were the same person, but I was kind of holding out hope that they weren't, if that makes any sense.
That would have been cool.
Right. And I don't know that I ever really put two and two together in terms of truly understanding. And I don't even know if I do now, truly understanding if what you're saying is true, and you're right, that Palpatine was really kind of playing both sides to set himself up to, you know, this was the long game to truly over. Like, I guess I've really never sat down and done the analysis, but I certainly didn't understand it coming out of this movie.
No.
Right.
Well, and I'm not sure if we were supposed to, but I mean, clearly in hindsight, he was Palpatine playing against the politicians, and he was Darth Sidious playing against the Trade Federation. And it wasn't very obvious at that point. So it wasn't clear whether it was the same person or not, even if it was very clearly the same actor. Maybe I gave Lucas too much credit from a story writing perspective to think that he would have come up with something more creative than that. But that's ultimately, I think, what he was doing there. So I guess that means he was a Sith at that point and kind of knew what he was doing, but it was not very clear to me anyways at that point.
What did you think we were getting next? Were you happy with this movie? Were you excited with what what future they laid out for us? Kind of where do you recall where you were kind of headspace wise after coming out of this movie, seeing it 5 times in the theaters and then umpteen times after that?
I was really jazzed. At the time, I was very excited just because it was new content. And I've said that a couple of times at this point. I don't think I had enough of a critical perspective of what the movie was doing at the time, which of course hindsight is a great benefit, right? Because now I've seen all 3 of those prequel movies and now I know where it ends up and ultimately have my own thoughts about that. But, you know, at the time I was just excited that it existed and it was there and we were going to get more. It was all, to me, regardless of all that Trade Federation treaty bullshit, the only thing I wanted to see was the turn of Anakin Skywalker. And I knew that was coming. And so it didn't really matter what they gave me up until that point. But at that point, I liked it. I thought it was good and I thought it was fun. In hindsight, I'll be honest with you, as I rewatched this movie recently, I kind of came down in a place where I was just sort of ambivalent, you know, like I didn't watch this movie and think, oh God, this was terrible. And I didn't watch this movie and think, oh, wow, this is actually a lot better than I thought. It was just kind of there. It didn't really do anything for me. Maybe because I've seen it so many times already, but it just kind of existed. It was a gateway into another story and I'm fine with that. I don't hate this movie. And if we're getting to that point of the podcast where we're talking about our overall feelings, but you know, it doesn't particularly age well in a way that I want to revisit it. I would not have seen this movie again for many, many years if it wasn't for this podcast. But at the same time, it was the gateway into a new series of Star Wars movies that eventually led to, two more prequel trilogy movies, and fair to say, probably the sequel trilogy movies as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's probably fair to say that this movie contains my two favorite characters of this trilogy are Qui-Gon and Darth Maul, and they're both dead at the end of this movie, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But I mean, like, legitimately, like, Qui-Gon, I really, really connected with that character. And Darth Maul, to me, was a character that was really embodied what I thought the Sith was all about at that point, right?
Yeah.
He was just an assassin, a badass, a force of nature.
Dark,
right?
and mysterious.
Yeah, right. And so the fact that my two favorite characters from this prequel trilogy can be gone at the end of this movie is a real bummer. I guess coming back to it after all these years, there's just a lot of politics in this movie that I just don't care about. I don't care about trade federations or trade routes or invasion or like what's the guy's name that is, communications can only mean one thing. And okay, fine. There's just a lot of kind of nonsense in here. I will reiterate the fact that I think Anakin coming into this movie, I think should have been 18 or 20, like an older version of Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the problem. When you've got and this is not a knock on Jake Lloyd by any stretch, when you've got a 10-year-old actor, how the fuck is he going to interact with a 20-year-old or 21 or however old she was, Natalie Portman?
Right.
Like, are we really supposed to believe that they're romantically involved? No, of course not. It's creepy at best.
Yes, absolutely.
And that'll come back in the next movie, right? But it's creepy at best. Like, they didn't have any sort of a quote relationship in this movie. She was the older babysitter at best. And that's and again, I'm really I'm coloring my thoughts about this movie based on what happens. But when you kind of look back on it objectively, you've got a lot of stuff here that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, I totally agree. I think that when we're watching this movie, we know that Anakin Skywalker and Padme are going to be a romantic item at some point. And it feels creepy because he clearly is like 8 years old, maybe. She is like 15 or 16. I mean, it's just something, it just doesn't sit right. And their chemistry is not good. And the dialogue that they're given is not good. And that's a problem for me.
Yeah. So is this in 2022, is this a recommendable Star Wars movie?
Wow.
It's a loaded question, I know.
Well, it's not a loaded question. It's a great question, but it's tough because there's so many layers to that. I guess it depends on who I'm recommending it to and what the person that I'm recommending it to, what they know about the Star Wars universe. But I mean, ultimately, I hate to say this, but probably not. No, I don't know. It's not a terrible movie. It really isn't. It's gotten a lot of shit, mostly because of Jar Jar, and we're going to scale back on Jar Jar a lot in the future. It's not a terrible movie, but the things that I liked about it when I saw it in 1999 were clearly things that I liked about just being in a new Star Wars movie. It wasn't enough to continue the legacy in a way that I thought really mattered. And so, yeah, ultimately it was just the flashiness of having a new Star Wars movie and the excitement around that. But they could have done a lot better. They did not have to muddy this thing up with all this political trade federation bullshit. They could have just told a Jedi Sith flavored story, and still gotten Palpatine to power without having to go through all the boring rigmarole.
Yeah, I really think that's where this movie falls down, right? It falls down, you've got the midichlorian stuff, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You've got the Trade Federation political stuff, which it makes sense, but nobody cares about. You've got a prepubescent Anakin Skywalker, which in retrospect is really fucking creepy in terms of a relationship with Padme, right? But then at the same time, you've got some amazing stuff here. You got arguably the best saber fight of the entire saga.
Yes.
You've got arguably a couple of the top 10 characters of the entire prequel trilogy, or maybe even the saga in Qui-Gon and Darth Maul. You've got the rise, arguably, of Palpatine. It might be a little bit clunky along the way. You've got the kind of the fall, or the fall from grace of the Jedi. And I don't know that I necessarily would have made them fall, but it's an interesting concept, right?
Sure.
They're no longer, quote, perfect. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think for a non-Star, this probably would play better for a non-Star Wars fan than it would for a Star Wars fan. If that makes any sense.
It might, but I feel like the acting and the delivery of the dialogue feels so stilted for both Natalie Portman and Jake Lloyd that I think people are going to watch this if they're not huge Star Wars fans and think, God, this just feels awkward. It feels like a B movie with the best special effects you've ever seen. Yeah,
you're probably right. I don't know if I'm looking to, like, would I recommend this? It's not the worst Star Wars movie.
No, we're going to get there very soon. It's not, actually.
It's funny, because there was a day that I would have told you that this is the worst Star Wars movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it's absolutely not.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not. And again, I don't know that necessarily makes it recommendable, but it's not the worst.
No, it doesn't deserve the hate.
I think we're getting there we haven't talked about it, but I think we're getting there in pretty short order here. All of that being said, you cannot underestimate the historical significance of the Phantom Menace. And again, we touched on it at the beginning of the podcast. We went 15 years without thinking we were never again, because again, this was before Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney.
Yep.
There was no more Star Wars. It was done. There was no more Star Wars.
For sure.
I don't even think there was any, like, was there even action figures? I don't know that there was even any action figures on the shelves. Like, Star Wars was done. Like, we would see Star Wars on Christmas Day. They would show it on TNT. That was about it.
Yeah.
There was no Disney Plus. There was, like, none of this stuff.
No animated series.
No, none of this stuff. So I cannot underestimate the importance of the Phantom Menace in the Star Wars saga and Star Wars lore in terms of what it did. Because it essentially, you could probably make the argument that the Phantom Menace led to Disney purchasing the Star Wars saga. You
100%.
Can make that argument. Absolutely
fair. That is a very, very fair argument, because at that point, Star Wars content was completely archival, right? It was all
it was dead.
1983. Nothing had happened since then. Yes, there were novelizations, there were extended universe books and things like that. Some of them, but very few of them authorized by Lucas.
Was the Thrawn trilogy before this? It was before this. That was before.
It was.
The Timothy Zahn stuff was before this.
And I think, but it's sort of kludgy to know what was approved by Lucas and what was not, and all of that. Most of that stuff was not. Here's an interesting question, though. Would it have made more sense to put the sequel trilogy in 1999 and then waited and then gone back to tell the prequel trilogy in 2015?
So it's interesting you say that, because I had this in my notes. I think this was the first time we ever had a prequel anything, wasn't it? I can't recall another prequel anything.
I don't. It can't be the first time, but it's definitely the biggest to this point.
I mean,
in history, for sure.
Theoretically, Temple of Doom was a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, but nobody even knows that.
Kind of, sort of. That's only because they changed the date. You wouldn't know it.
Right.
There's
That's
no
what I'm
reason
saying.
to assume it was a prequel otherwise.
I mean, the concept, the idea of a prequel did not exist. I don't think at least in the terms of the lexicon of moviegoers, didn't exist before this movie. I don't think. I would have to go back and research. I really don't think it did. To answer your question specifically, let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So you're asking, would I have preferred the sequel trilogy in 1999 and then the prequel trilogy in 2000 and whatever? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, would it have made more sense to do the sequel trilogy before the prequel trilogy?
I think in retrospect, it probably would have, especially based on what we got. I guess the big problem that the prequel trilogy created was it ruined one of the greatest spoilers in movie history, right? Like if you were to sit down, and my wife and I did this after the fact. So my wife had married me and never had seen a Star Wars movie ever. And so I said, okay, well, we're going to sit down. We're going to watch we were actually watching them in preparation for The Force Awakens. So we watched them in not release order, but we watched them in chronological order. So we started with episode 1. If you watch them in that order, the greatest spoiler in movie history, "No, I am your father," is spoiled in fucking episode 1.
Yeah.
Now, would releasing the sequel trilogy before the prequel fix that? No, well, I guess it would. I don't know. I think.
I guess I was thinking of it from the perspective of our actors are younger. Perhaps we could have told better stories. Perhaps we could have had Luke and Han and Leia all actively in their adventures together. I mean, do I think that George Lucas could have done that on his own, like he apparently tried to do with this prequel trilogy? Absolutely not.
I guess here's what I will say, and I don't know that this necessarily answers your question, but I will say that, and again, we're at the end of the first of 3 prequel trilogy podcasts. I still feel that the prequel trilogy is less than the sequel trilogy.
Agreed. For sure. But not because, only because it failed from an execution standpoint. I think conceptually it should have been better.
It should have been. Well, but should it? Because I guess in theory, a prequel just kind of by definition should be less than the OG and should be less than the sequel.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point because the stakes are less because you know exactly who's not going to die. Obi-Wan's going to make it through the whole trilogy. You know that Luke and Leia are going to come from somewhere. Anakin is going to descend into madness and all of that stuff. But I don't think necessarily knowing all that stuff means that it wouldn't have been better, but it's an interesting argument. I think that I kind of wish that they would have tackled the sequel trilogy first, but if the quality of the sequel trilogy would have been to the same level of what the prequel trilogy was, then I guess I'm glad that they didn't. As much as I wanted to see Han Solo younger, and I wanted to see Carrie Fisher younger and Mark Hamill younger in a way that they could all, band together to do one final mission or do something fun, that would have been great. And that would have been much better served in the late 90s, early 2000s. But I don't think, George Lucas wrote and directed all 3 of these prequel movies that we're going to talk about. And I think that's going to be the biggest fucking problem with all of these movies.
Well, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right 100% that George is kind of stuck in his version of the Star Wars universe, which is fine. It's his fucking universe. Sure. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we wanted. I guess, and you said something there that was really interesting to me. I'm not sure that the technology was ready to do what we wanted in 1999. Because I think what we would have wanted from a sequel trilogy would have been a de-aged Han Solo, a de-aged, I don't know that we were ready for that. I don't know that the technology was ready for that.
That's fair. Yeah.
So kind of as we march towards the end here, what's the best thing about the Phantom Menace? One thing.
The best thing about the Phantom Menace for me was probably the new characters that they introduced, which you had kind of already alluded to. It's Qui-Gon and it's Darth Maul. I think that those characters are the most interesting additions, I guess, to the Star Wars universe. I will say that Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, I don't think he shines quite enough yet in this movie, but he's going to end up being the most important part of this entire 3-movie saga. And we're going to get there. But yes, I think for this movie in its own isolated little bubble, Qui-Gon is great and Darth Maul is great. And I wanted more of those, and I wanted those both to continue throughout the series. And unfortunately they didn't.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the answer for me would have been Qui-Gon. And again, that's not taking anything away from Ray Park. I loved Liam Neeson here. I loved Qui-Gon here. And I will reiterate what you said. Ewan McGregor is the best, but like far and away the best part of the prequel trilogy. Like there's hands down. He's the one that cares to be there clearly. And it's more obvious in the second and third movies. Qui-Gon and Darth Maul are clearly the best things of this movie. And the fact that they're both dead at the end of this movie really bums me out. But I think that's but I think that's pretty representative of this movie, right? I think that's kind of the perfect bow of this movie. The best things of this movie are dead at the end of it.
I will say a very close second, in my opinion, to Ewan McGregor is Ian McDiarmid, because as much as I don't really love the way that they write Palpatine, I love the way that Ian McDiarmid plays Palpatine. He does such a good job. He is spot on in every single scene. And when I see him outside of his makeup, I start to get really, really excited because I know what's coming with this actor and this character. And I'm not sure what has happening with Darth Sidious and with the the Chancellor role and all of that stuff, but I'm jazzed because I know where this is going. And Ian McDiarmid is, we talked about this in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like, he's my favorite part of that movie. He does so well in that movie. And I'm just excited that he's back because the Emperor has always been one of my favorite characters. And I love that they bring him in from the get-go and that they're going to create a pretty significant character arc for him specifically.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I was just going to say that you're right. I mean, we went out of our way during our Rise of Skywalker podcast to talk about how awesome Ian McDiarmid was, right? And I think you're right. And I think it just kind of goes to show what an awesome actor this guy is, right? I mean, he whether he's got a bit part, whether he's a hologram, whether he's two characters, one character, what have you, he's pretty outstanding. And again, I remember very vividly coming out of this movie going like, oh shit, like, is it the same guy? Is it two guys? Is it a clone? Is it who knows? And I was really, really excited about what would become Attack of the Clones. Do you remember, kind of as a wrap up here, do you remember kind of how you were feeling coming out of this movie? Were you excited? Were you trepidatious? Were you like, do you remember?
Yeah, I was very excited. And I think one of the things, just to go back to Ian McDiarmid and Palpatine, one of the things that I was most excited about is to see where that was going. And I don't think that they intentionally tried to focus on that piece of it as much, but we all know where Anakin Skywalker is going. It was just a matter of time and storytelling. But to kind of figure out what was happening with Palpatine, as much as I have sort of shit on the whole political discourse of what they did with the first movie, they still, to some degree, made me interested in Palpatine's journey as part of this, because we knew that Palpatine was going to be a key part in turning Anakin into Darth Vader. And So I was most interested to figure out, okay, they've got Ian McDermott as a senator, and they've got him, well, I guess chancellor specifically, and they've also got him as this Sith Lord. How are they going to combine these two? Where is this going to go? How are they going to merge these worlds? That's what I was really the most interested in. And going into Attack of the Clones, I was super fired up. I was very excited.
Yeah, I was right there with you. I came out of this watching this movie kind of going, holy shit, what just happened? Yeah, there was some stuff that I didn't quite understand. Yeah, the midichlorian thing didn't quite make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, there's some politics here, but holy shit, we've got this guy that I know. We've got Palpatine.
Yeah. Holy
shit, we've got Obi-Wan. I know where he's going. Oh my God, I've got Anakin. I know where he's going. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So there was enough through lines that I understood kind of where we were going.
Yeah.
So
I was able to forgive it for its flaws at the time because I knew where we were going and I just couldn't wait to get there.
Right. So, all right. So on that note, we're done with the Phantom Menace.
That was a good one. It was long, but it was good. It wasn't as painful as I thought it could have possibly been.
I don't. So like, what do you think? Like overall, everything, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs in the middle. I think overall, I think it's okay. I'm all right with it existing. It's not going to be something that I revisit, but it's also not going to be something I'm going to go on a message board and talk shit about. I think it's fine. It was to your point, it was the catalyst to reinvigorate Star Wars in the cinema world. And I think that in itself, it was absolutely 100% worth being made. Do I agree with all the story choices? No, absolutely not. And we're definitely going to talk a lot about where things go from here and how we feel about that. But yeah, I'm glad it hit the screen. I'm glad you and I had a chance to see a new Star Wars movie together in the theaters, and it was exciting. And overall, I'd say thumbs in the middle in the sense that, you know, it's not going to be infinitely rewatchable, but I'm glad it exists. It fits in the universe.
That is fair.
And you?
I think if I had to do binary kind of 1 or 0, up or down, I would go up, only because, again, with all of the hype coming into it and just the fact that it was the first brand new Star Wars content that we had seen in 16 years. Yeah. It was like, to be fair, it probably got some goodwill from that. Right. And it made me kind of, it made me forgive some of the bullshit. But yeah, I was coming out of this, I was very excited, and I was really looking forward to what would become the Attack of the Clones. Right. And so I think it's probably fair to say that our next podcast is going to be a deep dive review of Attack of the Clones.
I think we should.
I'm not going to spoil my review of that, but I'll tell you right now, I'm not a huge fan of Attack of the Clones.
It'll be interesting because I have not watched this movie in a very long time.
Okay.
I, much like you, I don't have great memories of it, but I'm interested to review it or re-review it and see if anything sort of stands out from a story perspective or how that all works. I'm a little worried about where it's going to go, but ultimately it's going to lead us towards Revenge of the Sith, which is the climax of this prequel trilogy, and you know, we'll see where that goes. But I'm excited to dive in, and whether we give it some credit or whether we just talk a bunch of shit about it, whatever happens, it's going to be a blast.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Mr. Pip, for joining me. This was an amazing discussion. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate not only this discussion, but our friendship. Love you, brother. This has been the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie, and I've been joined once again by Pip. Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.
Love you back. Adios.